Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt. This thing's name is the Alfa Romeo Tonale. It's the first time that we've heard the name Tonale. But the name isn't the only thing that's a first. This is the first electrified Alfa Romeo. It's a plug-in hybrid. And this will be the last Alfa Romeo that we see rolled out with a gas engine. In the next 5 years, we're going to get 5 new Alfas, and they're all going to be powered with electricity. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Today, we're going to talk about everything that you need to know about the new Tonale. Let's get into it. Okay, first thing we got to talk about. What is this thing? Well, this Tonale is the first new model for Alfa Romeo since the Stelvio came out in 2016 and the Giulia in 2015, the year before. This Tonale sits below the Stelvio in the lineup, and we'll talk more about that in a second. This is a subcompact crossover. It shares some of its DNA and chassis developments with the Jeep Compass. It's got a sister vehicle from Dodge, the Hornet, that you've seen on the channel already, and there's evidence of some of that sharing in places like the window says Mopar, and also the brakes that say Mopar. And it's not just the Tonale name that's a first here. This is the first Alfa to ever be electrified. The plug-in version here that we get in the States is the only version of the Tonale that we're going to get, whereas the European markets will get non-hybrid versions. Okay, so it's smaller than the Stelvio. What does that mean? What does this thing compete against? How should we be benchmarking it? Well, the main competitors are things like BMW's X1 and their brand new X2. Mercedes has things like their GLA, and the sloping roofline that you get here makes it more X2 GLA competitor than X1 and GLB competitor. And then from Audi, you've got things like their Q3. But it's what's under the hood here that's kind of the big deal, and something that you're not going to get from any of those German competitors. This is a plug-in hybrid. And what we have here under the hood, that means, is the 1.3 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. You've got hybrid components here. You've got 2 electric motors, one front, one rear, and combined output from the engine and electric motors is 285 horsepower and 347 pound-feet of torque. And if you want to go in just electric mode, you'll have like 30 to 31 miles of full EV range. And it says Veloce on the side, and 0 to 60 is just about 5.5 seconds, so they mean it. Now, with some of the parts sharing and the chassis from the Jeep and the fact that it's very similar to a Dodge Hornet, some will say that it's not full Alfa Romeo, but it certainly looks full Alfa Romeo. It is gorgeous. Look at this Misano Blue. It's overcast today, so it's hard to see, but there's great metal flake in there, and it looks stunning. I would have Misano Blue or Verde, whatever that green color is called. It looks excellent. This is certainly better looking than an X1, X2, GLA, GLB, and the Q3. And some of that is down to the grille. You see you have the classic Alfa triangle or beak. It is finished in black, and that is going to be how it's finished in all Tonales aside from the base TI. And then you look at the running lights. You've got the triple dip effect that we've seen on the newly updated Stelvio and Giulia twins, and now this follows suit very much so. And it's the same thing in the back. You have a full width tail bar, but you still have the triple dips on either side. And then on the profiler, we're looking at wheels and tires. Now look at this wheel and tell me, if you didn't know what kind of car this was, it'd be immediately apparent that it's an Alfa Romeo. It's a very Alfa design with the 5 clover type style. And look, we've got 20-inch wheels here. The base is an 18, you can go up to the 20s here. And then this is important. You see this red brake caliper here. That signifies that you have the Brembo, or the upgraded brakes. They look nice and meaty up front, and they look a little bit smaller here in the rear. But now for one of the Easter eggs. You see you have black treatments for your wing mirror and your window treatments, but you also have the little Italian flag detail to remind you that this Alfa Romeo is an Italian car, kind of. But one of my favorite Easter eggs is this zappy snake here. Now this is only on the driver's side. On the passenger side, you don't have it, and that's because this is the conventional fuel door, or petrol door for our UK friends. You come over here, and this is where you charge the car. And at night, this will light up. It doesn't light up when you're charging, which is interesting. And also interestingly, you can open this side, the charge door, from the outside, but you have to open the fuel door from the inside. See? And then our Veloce trim is the only trim to get these chrome finished dual exhaust tips. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, this is the smaller version of the Stelvio. This is a class below it in terms of size. It's actually 6 inches shorter than the Stelvio and 2 inches narrower. But you actually have best-in-class rear passenger volume. You have five more inches of passenger volume in the rear here, so it's actually bigger than the Stelvio. I'm 6'1", this is a subcompact SUV, and I have more space in here than I do in something like maybe even an X3. And then there's the trunk, which has the kick gesture, power tailgate, excellent, you love to see it. But again, 6 inches shorter than the Stelvio, 2 inches narrower than the Stelvio, and you still have more trunk space with the rear seats up than the Stelvio. Again, this is a plug-in hybrid. It is significantly smaller, and yet they've maximized the interior space to make it more spacious and practical than the bigger sibling. This is impressive. This also has about the same cargo space that you get in the BMW X1, the full top one, not the coupe one, so you have more space. This is almost a class-leading cargo area here. You have a ski pass, you've got grocery bag hangers here, you've got a 12-volt socket, and you have some storage underneath for your charger. And then, as we go inside, we're going to talk about the interior design. It is very familiar Alfa Romeo, which on the face of it, great. The thing that annoys me a little bit is next week we'll show you the Dodge Hornet has almost an identical interior, which kind of dilutes this a little bit. But you've got classic Alfa stuff like your start-stop button on the steering wheel. It takes about a minute or, I don't know, a couple days to get used to it being there than, you know, on the center console where it's more common. Interestingly, the Hornet, that's going to be your start-stop button, and that is going to be your drive mode. But classic Alfa stuff, mile-long metallic paddle shifters, you'll love to see it. This also is the scroll wheel to change the song. I love and hate that, depending on how I'm feeling that day. And as far as the interior goes, what you're seeing, this is the only color that you're gonna get. It's gonna be black leather with some slightly dark gray accenting and stitching. And something I'm a little surprised to see on a sporty Italian Alfa Romeo is the fact that you don't get a head-up display. It's a bit odd. And I do want to touch on this. We touched on this a second ago, but this is your drive selector. You've got 3 main drive modes plus e-save. E-save is going to prioritize using the gas engine to save or maintain your fully electric range for later use. But here you have your 3 drive modes. D is Dinamica, which is essentially your sport mode, and it's going to be in hybrid only. You cannot go in fully electric in Dinamica, sorry. And you see that this is your damper or adaptive damper. The Veloce is the only trim to get adaptive dampers, and it's only stiff in Dinamica. You can unstiff it by pressing the button, but you go down to Naturale or normal mode. Again, nice little graphic. And then this, in Naturale, you can kind of go back and forth between hybrid or fully electric, but it is a little bit less intense, and you can't turn on your stiff dampers. And then A, advanced efficiency. Interesting, Dinamica Naturale, very Italian. A, advanced efficiency, sounds almost German. But this is gonna be predominantly electric only, and when you run out of electric range, it'll shoot you into Naturale mode. And then here, talking about your head unit, this is what everyone's here for, right? 10.25 inch, it's very good, black levels are great. It's the updated Uconnect 5 system. You've got wireless Apple CarPlay, I've disconnected for shooting today. Wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, you have Alexa built into here. You also have over-the-air updates, so it's constantly as fresh as it possibly can be. And you have pretty good 360 cameras. I will say, they look great, but the refresh rate, the shutter speed, sometimes feels a little bit jumpy at lower or higher speeds when you're reversing. And then next door is your fully digital instrument cluster, and this is really good. I love this. The graphics are excellent. You can control different customizability things with this little button and then your scroll wheel. So you've got active readouts of how you're genning and recouping and releasing power, fuel economy, all sorts of stuff. You press it again, and then you can control other quadrants, trip information, blank screen, you know, active or real-time fuel economy, stuff like that. And you can even make it, you know, full screen navigation like you would in an Audi. And it has a Stellantis product and one that's kind of zippy. You can go into vehicle and you've got performance pages. Again, this is kind of where it gets a little bit laggy or slower, but you got active readouts of turbo pressure, torque. It's it's in Newton meters, which is interesting, not pound feet, so it's kind of a Euro spec. But then you go to your accessory gauges, and you've got temperatures, battery levels, and that sort of thing. So not a huge amount, not the same that you get in a Hellcat, but still cool to see. But then interestingly, next to it is your electric stuff. You've got your e-hybrid screen, so you can schedule charging times. You can go into e-save and eco coaching. So it'll help you drive more efficiently, although I'm already very good at driving efficiently, which may be not the most cool thing to say driving an Alfa Romeo. And then there's the wireless charging pad, which normally I wouldn't talk about, but it's kind of interesting. You've got an Alfa Romeo logo embossed into the rubber, and then you're going to throw the phone in, it's going to start charging, and then it's going to always show you this. I'm sure you can turn it off in settings, but it's going to show you a notification that something's in the tray. I know, I just put it in there. I need to see my navigation or my music or whatever. I don't need to see that there's something in there. I know. And then on this stalk of the steering wheel, you have all of your adaptive cruise and driver assistance suite stuff. You do have adaptive cruise, and you've got active lane keep. It will make you keep your hands on the steering wheel every about 10-ish seconds, and it won't change lanes for you, but for something in this price point, very good system. It worked really well in the construction around my house, and that's really kind of the gut test. And I just want to talk about these seats again. Very comfortable. Black is the only color you're going to get, but it's very comfortable. You do have Alfa Romeo embroidered into your headrests, which is a little bit extra money. You don't have it in the back seats like you would in the Maserati, but the seats themselves, heated, cooled, and a heated steering wheel. So some proper luxury stuff in here. And then look at this. We have a pano-ish roof. I like it. And I don't know who's doing this, but for interest of being thorough, let's talk about towing. You can tow up to 2,000 pounds with this thing, which is more than you get even in some vehicles on a segment above this. I always think of the Honda CR-V, which maxes out at 1,500, or the Toyota RAV4. Again, not really competitors to this, but they're even in a segment in terms of size and price above. And they're towing less than this, 2,000 pounds, 1,500 for the Honda, 1,750 for the RAV4. This has got some muscle. And then there's just like two little annoyances. One is the blinker. It returns to center. It does that thing, which is just kind of annoying. It also sounds kind of weird. And then I did have an issue with the wireless Spotify. See, now, annoying. And then I did have an issue with the Spotify. When I went to it from the home screen, I could get into it, but when I went to it from CarPlay, it like wasn't showing up. It was playing, it was operating fine, but I just couldn't see what was on the screen. And last but not least, of course, we're gonna talk about price. Now, the Tonale starts at $43,000. That's about $3,000 more than the sister Hornet, which makes sense. In terms of competitors, though, the BMW X1 starts at just under 40K, but when you get into the X1 M35i, that starts at about 50K, which is exactly where this Veloce trim starts. And as tested, this is $57,000, which I went on BMW's website, spec'd out an X1 M35i, and it was pretty much identical in price. But this is an Alfa Romeo, and it's kind of speedy, so let's go for a drive. Okay, we're gonna go up into Dinamica, so dampers get stiff. Full access to the power, 1.3 liter, turbocharged 4-cylinder, 285 horsepower, 347 pound-feet. Let's see what it does. No torque steer, look at that. Okay, 0 to 60, 5.5, 5.6-ish seconds. It's good, it's good. For this segment, it has power, it has guts, and I like that. And it's pretty smooth power. The only bummer, I think, is the fact that I know out back, it sounds way better than it does in here. I don't drive around to make other people hear my car. I don't want them to have a better experience with my car than I do. I want it to sound good in here. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but you have a 6-speed Aisin transmission. It's fine, it's pretty good. It's actually pretty snappy. I got no issues with it whatsoever. You got the big metallic paddle shifters, classic Alfa stuff. I do really like that. But yeah, in Dinamica mode, there's so much going on. It's got electric torque that comes in while the transmission downshifts, and then you've got turbo, you know, that's spooling boost pressure, and then that comes in, and then there's a lot going on. So it's a very different Alfa Romeo experience. Does that mean it's a worse Alfa Romeo experience? I don't necessarily think so, no. But it is, well, I say that, but then I also know that like you know, the twin turbo V6 in the Giulia and Stelvio Quadrifolios is like a top tier experience, and this is very different from that. But when it comes to like the actual driving experience and what it's like to drive hard, I mean, with the dampers in stiff mode, it is stiff. We'll head up to this corner here and I'll just show you. It stays flat, it stays planted. The only problem, and I'll demonstrate it here, is when you come into a corner, brakes, tip in, good. Mid-corner hold, good. On power, not so good. And that's because when I get on power on corner exit in Alpha, I want the butt to do this. I want the butt to shift around, and it's not, because this is, at its heart, a Jeep Compass chassis, which means front wheel drive first. It is sending power to the back, but not enough. Not enough to kind of break it loose. And then I do have traction control on and that sort of thing, but it's just not quite the Alpha experience. And I think that's really the major theme of this car, is like, it's an identity thing. So it says Alfa Romeo here, but next week I'm gonna be in an interior that looks exactly like this, and it's gonna say Dodge here. And it's kind of that leaves a taste in your mouth. It's kind of that's gonna take the Alpha purist and somebody who's historically really loved and sought after Alphas, and they're gonna be like, oh, it's a Jeep chassis, it's front wheel drive first, and you know, it's got a bunch of power, and I do like the fact that it has electric range, but it's not an Alpha. So it's really kind of how you define the identity of what the car and what the brand is. But if you're down with it, it's a good car. The seating position's a little too high, but the power comes in, it's smooth. You switch down into A, advanced efficiency, that kills the engine entirely. You're just rolling around in electric, and this is brilliant. This is how it's gonna be driven most of the time by most of the people that are actually gonna buy this thing. I talked to Alpha, their demo skews largely male. They want this to bring in more females. And I think with the refinement, the quietness that you get, the civility, the just luxury that you get here feeling, it's not the historic racing Alpha pedigree, but it's something that is more appreciable each day. When you get into the car, you put your podcast on, you go to work in the morning, you're tired, this is something that you're gonna like. It's civil, it's quiet, it's smooth, and it's something that you're not getting from BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Porsche. This is something just for the Alpha, at least for now. So I think it's probably a good time to hit in the final thoughts. So those are the 28 things you need to know about the new Alfa Romeo Tonale. I know we talked a lot about the Dodge Hornet, its sister cousin vehicle, but as it happens, we're actually spending next week, all of next week, with the new Hornet. So stay tuned for that, because we're going to talk just how similar these two really are. We'll see you then.